now that we've talked about contemporary artist Adam Fu, as well as other various neon lights and other artists around the world and how they come up with their own things, I want you to try practicing drawing two symbols. You can use this sheet here. These are some examples, and try practicing. Do one here and do another here. Sometimes it feels, as you're doing it, you might go, oh, you know, this is a lot easier for me when I draw this shape, but this one's a little more tricky. Or this one's easier, but there's too much detail. You'll notice in here there's not a lot of detail, because when you make that reflection of the neon, you don't need a lot. You really want to keep it as simple as you possibly can. You're going to be using only one paint color, so try not to use two when you're thinking about it, and we'll practice this first. So what I want you to do is, I've got these symbol ideas here for you to use, and then we'll talk about making tints and shades on the back. So take the moment now to draw two different concepts. All right, so now both of these done. On the back, I've moved towards coming up with our tints and shades practice. So a hue is an important term I want you to know. A hue, and I'll zoom in here for us, is a pure color. So this is when there's nothing mixed in it. There's no white mixed in it. There's no black. It is absolutely the color that you would get on a color wheel. And I know looking at it from here, this does not look like a quite beautiful red, but that's sometimes it changes when you're looking on computer screens versus color truly in its real form when it's in natural light. So to make a tint, it's anything mixed with white. When you take your hue color, this is red, and you mix red and white together, you can make a pink, which is a tint. So the color gets lighter and lighter as it goes. It's tinted. If you take your pure hue color and you mix it with some black, you end up making a shade. So a shade is something that it's darker, darker, and darker. To come up with how you're going to be making your own, okay? Using crayons, I want you to go in and think about what is your hue color going to be. Mine, I would like to do a green. So I'm gonna get 3 crayons. This one says green on it, and I'm going to put my hue color is here. Now crayons blend, they don't blend as great as the paint's going to, but I want you to just start thinking about what your hue color is, and just to help keep in mind as you're making this. So to make a tint, I need lots of white first, plus my hue. So I'm going to take out a white crayon, and I'm going to put white nice and heavy pressure on here. I'm going to take my green, my hue color that's pure, and I'm going to lightly go over it. Now that is my tint. It's a nice light green. Again, it's not perfect, but it's just practice. Now for making a tint that is closer to my hue color, I'm going to use a little bit of white and put more of my green hue color into it. So I'm going to put some of my green on, and then I'm going to put the white on top of it. And now you can see the change, the difference. This has a lot of white. This has a little bit of white. My next one is to make my shades. So I need a black crayon. As you can see, it's my black one. And I'm going to do the hue plus a little bit of black. So I'm going to put my shade, my hue on it like this, and then I'm going to put a tiny bit of black on top of it. And this makes my nice pretty shade. It's a darker green than I started with. Now I would like to make another shade, and so with this one I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to do my green, my hue, and then I'm going to add more black on top of it. I'm not doing heavy pressure the black because the black will overpower it, but you can see like how it's blending and it makes a darker hue of that green. So this is what I want you to practice. You practice which one you're going to draw, and then you're going to practice doing this. Once you feel like you're ready, this is the image that I am choosing. I want to think about how am I going to go around it. So when we go to do our project, we're going to break it down into these few things here. This is an example from the Cool Teacher Club. So she has a lot of these really great resources, and I recommend that to get some of her other ideas too. We're going to trace our drawing, our symbol, onto our black paper. We're going to make a light tint, and then what we're going to do is make a tint with a small amount of white around that to start that glow. And then we're going to make our shade. So we do a shade, a darker shade, and you can keep going until you feel that you have met it. So as you can see, it's going to happen on the outside as well as the inside of it, and we're going to work at it slowly, okay? This is great practice for figuring out if you think that this is going to work for you or not work for you as you're building it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do a white around the outside of my pencil, and then I'm going to take my green and I'm going to nice and light on top of it. So this is my first tint. Nice light tint. Then I'm going to do the next one where I'm going to go nice and light with my crayon without the white, and you can see it's just a little darker. Not a lot, but just a little. And I'm going to take my white and I'm going to put that on top of it to give it a better tint. From here, I'm going to go and do my shade now. So I'm going to make my shade. I do my green around it again. And on top of this one, this has a little bit of black. So I put a little bit of black on top of it. Now it's not going to look its greatest right now because this is practice and it's with crayons. I'm going to go again, nice and dark around it. And my black is going to be a lot heavier on this particular one. The paint will look a lot better. So I only did around the outside. I would have to do this on the inside lines too to get the same effect. So if I was to do that, when I did this particular light shade, I would have done the light shade on each of these other lines that I drew as well. And so then I would have to go back and I'd have to go nice and gentle on each of these to make them stand out the same way I did the other one. For the next step, you're going to get your black paper. You're going to use a pencil, and I'm going to have you put your name and teacher code right on your paper. I know it's hard to see. This is sample and teacher TC for me. Flip it over, and I would like you to draw your shape, the symbol that you've chosen, large. It could be portrait mode. It could also be landscape mode, whichever you prefer. Once you have your symbol drawn, again, mine is the way I want it to be. It could be a little changed up. It doesn't have to be exactly the same that I drew here. I just made it my own little version because, again, it's a neon light. All right, so the next step is you're going to have a piece of this paper here, which is like a waxier paper. It's actually called a paint palette paper. And I've got your tempera, so you're going to choose your hue. Again, it has to be a pure one that's on the color wheel. So red, orange, yellow, green, blue, or purple. Nothing mixed in it, just pure hue color. So I decided I'm gonna go with green. So I've got my green and I have my white to make my tint. I also have some green on the side and I have my black to make my shade. The first thing that we need to do is we're gonna make a very light tint. That's our very important first piece. I'm gonna put my pencil away because I don't want it to roll into the paint. And then I've got my cup and I have my brush. We're not tapping. You do not need a lot of water on this paint because it's already wet for you. So here's my big amount of white. And what I'm going to do is I'm gonna take a tiny little dollop, literally very tiny, and I'm gonna put this in this massive amount of white. I want it as light as I possibly can. It looks like this brush had another color in it. So I can't quite see here. I probably put a little too much. I'm just gonna make it a little bit more green. Baby steps is what I say. Perfect. This is a light, beautiful tinted green. So I'm going to kind of just roll my brush like this. And then what I'm going to do is trace all of my pencil using that particular paint. Now that I did this one, I might go back a few times and just retrace where the paper drank in the paint. I don't want to see the black shining through because then that takes away from my illusion. So once you have this part done, don't rinse your brush because we still need this white and that green. So I'm going to take a chunk of my white and I'm going to move it up like this. I'm going to then take a good amount of green and I'm going to mix it because I want to make a different tint. It's still really light, so I'm going to grab a little bit more of a chunk and I'm going to mix it on here. When you're mixing it, you don't want to spread it everywhere because then you're going to have none of your color to be able to paint onto your paper. So I still want it a little bit darker. And judge it. You don't want it as dark as this, but you can see how significant it changes from that light minty green to a different type of green here. Okay? So I still do, I take a little chunk and I blend it. Don't get it all the way up on the metal because then again, you're wasting paint. So if you need to, you just kind of twirl it on the bottom here and there's your color. Now, you're gonna take this and you're not gonna go over it, but you're gonna go next to your first color and you're gonna touch it. And this is why it's important that you make enough of this color because it's nearly impossible to make the exact same one that you're doing. Unless you go to, say, Home Depot and they have a certain machine that knows exactly how much to put in it. Still, it's highly recommended if you're painting a room that you get at the same time 2 amounts of that color or enough so you don't end up with different tints or shades of the color you're painting. Now that I did the outside, I'm going to do the inside as well. So I'm going to grab it and I'm going to do the inside everywhere I did. This is why you want to make sure you have a design that's not too detailed because this would be very hard to keep up with the whole way. I do have smaller brushes if you find you need to go in with smaller brushes into certain spaces. We'll also go back and clean up our first lines when we're done, which is why we keep our first thing nice and ready. And we also make a significant amount of the paint color we're doing. Okay. Now, once you have all of this, this is where I say you can go back in and you can work on your initial tint and just clean up those lines if you mixed it on accident or lost some of it. It's the perfect chance because we will not have time later to go back because you won't have that color. All right, so here's our start. It's very important that now you rinse your brush and you get fresh, clean water, because you cannot have any white touching when you make the shade. Now that I have a fresh cup, my brush is nice and clean, we're going to make our shades. So I'm going to turn this way so you can see how I'm doing it. And again, we're going to make the shade by doing a tiny bit of black into our pure hue color. And then we keep building in by adding a little bit more black into it. And you can make as many layers as you would like onto your neon symbol. So same thing, I'm going to scoop a little bit of the black and I'm going to put it on the side. And I'm going to scoop a lot of green and I'm going to mix it. You can already see that it's a nice dark green hue. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go around everything. Try your best not to get any white on it, because if you do, you're going to end up making a gray. And that takes away part of your illusion. So if we have to do this where we do the tints one day and the shades another, we can easily do that as well. Make sure you do the in details and the out details. If you don't have any room for the inside details, just do a tiny smidgen of a line, and that will at least give the shade that you're looking for. I always practice squint your eyes to see if you're able to capture what you're looking to do. So like here, I don't have any room. You can turn your paper, nothing says that you can't rotate it. And I'm going to just lightly draw a line across, and there's my shade inside of there. All right, so now that I've made this particular one, I need to make a darker. So I don't need to rinse my brush. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take more green. I'm going to put it next to this. I'm going to take a tiny bit more black, like a little bit more, and I'm going to mix it. So it should be a darker green now. A lot darker, right? And I'm going to do this exact same thing. I'm going to go around it, and now it's a darker shade of green. Take your time as you do it, and it should give you a nice contrast. Again, if there's spaces, nothing says you have to cover it all in. You can leave some of the black paper shining through it. I think this will be my last one. If you really want to go for another layer, again, you have your green, and then you grab a lot more black and you mix it until it gets closer. You don't want it to be pure black though. It should still be different, where you can't tell. I mean, you can still tell that this is more green than that. And that's when you can go in and you can add another layer if you want, but I think I'm just gonna leave mine the way it is because I like the way it's gone. I'm just gonna make it a little thicker here. And there you go. This then goes on the dry rack, and you've got your neon done. All right, same thing that I did with the green. This is with the red, if I was to do tints for the red and shades for the black. Anyways, I made the shape of a heart here, and then I got the tail, the heart balloon. My name and teacher code is on the back. And for this particular one, I'm going to show you if I use a thinner brush in order to be able to make the next part. All right, so the first thing that you want to do is I would like to make a very light tint. So to do so, I'm going to take a scoop of this white. I'll take a little bit larger because my piece is a little bit bigger. And I'm going to take a tiny bit of this red, and I'm going to mix it. It's a lot easier to go darker. It's very hard to go lighter. So as I mix this all together, I'm keeping it in a small circle. I'm not going over the whole thing, because if I do that, well, I'm wasting the paint. You can't ever remake the same color. And how else am I going to use it on my painting? So I'm twisting my brush, like rolling it like this to get it off, because I don't want it creeping all the way up. And this is the light that I'm looking for. So you're going to take this and you're going to go over your pencil line, as nicely as you can. Go back, grab some more of that paint if you find that as it's drying it needs a second layer. And all of your pencil marks, go over it with that nice beautiful tint that you just made. All right, so now that I've got this, I've gone back, I've added in a little bit more of my layer. I'm not going to rinse my brush. And instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a chunk of white again, put it on here, because I need more paint, right? And I'm going to take a lot more red, and I'm going to mix it. So it should be a little bit darker. Get like a good medium color. Okay, so I'm going to use this amount and I'm going to paint it on both sides of this tint. You can start on the inside or the outside. So now that I've rinsed my cup, fresh water, my brush is nice and clean, we're gonna move into the shades. We don't want it to be touching any of the tints as this is drying because, yeah, the white to it, you end up with certain gray. If we did it, say, on white paper, I wanted to show you like the contrast of black to white. This paper is meant for paint, so you can kind of see that it doesn't absorb as much. Whereas if we use the black construction paper like we're doing, you might come across seeing that it's absorbing into it. Another option would be to paint the white paper black and then paint over it. So think about as you're making it, but either or, it still gives it this really neat neon-y effect that I'm going for. All right, so now what we're gonna do is make our shade. You can turn it a different way if you need, or if you're still happy doing it this way, you're more than welcome to. We need a little bit of black and a lot of red to make our first shade. Black is very powerful, so remember we always start with the lightest color first, and then you work to the darker color, and we do it in small increments. So I'm going to use my brush. I'm going to take a scoop of red and put it on the side here, and I'm going to take a tiny bit of black and I'm going to mix it. Immediately you can see I have a nice shade. So it gives it this really beautiful shade of red, and then I'm going to go around everything that I just did here, same way again. All right, so now that you've done that one, you're going to take a big chunk of your red, because you're gonna need the next, and a big chunk of black. You're gonna mix it. It's gonna be a nice dark red. And that, you'll keep painting. And you don't want it to be too drastic, but you want it to be enough. And you could keep going layer and layer. So if you're like, oh, I went too much, you might need to do a smaller spot of the red, and then you can go in and paint that, and then you can go to a darker. But I like the just going right in, because I want this to be my last one. So I'm gonna make this a nice deep shade with lots of black and my red, because I want it to be a nice contrast. All right. And once you're done, you could put this on the dry rack. If you wanted to do another layer, you could. Again, I still have these colors here, so if I so chose that I wanted to add like a highlight or something in it, I do the contour kind of growing of this on the outside of that.